Hello, in today's video, I have full foundation reviews of 5 new foundations after testing each for several days in various ways. We don't do first impressions here to give you a good look at each foundation. You'll see how they apply, what they look like, and how they wear on me throughout the day, as well as what skin types I think would benefit the most from each. Welcome back to my channel. Welcome if you're new. I test out a lot of foundations, concealers, powders, primers, complexion products in general here on my channel because I'm almost 50, and as we get older, it just gets harder and harder to find the right product. So let's go ahead and get into these foundations and see how they worked for me and if any of them might work for you. I'm starting with the foundation that has the most notes and that I had to test more days than any foundation in this foundation roundup. This is Anastasia Beverly Hills Impeccable Blurring Second Skin Matte Foundation. For each of these foundations, I'm going to give you the claims of the foundations and then go through my testing and my ratings and give you my final thoughts, and we'll just see if they live up to the claims. This is going to be my longest review in this video because I did have to test it for so many days for a few reasons. It retails for $46 for 1.18 ounce, so you're getting a bit more than your typical 1 ounce foundation bottle. There are 25 shades, and I had sort of a hard time selecting my shade when I was placing my order because I typically select a light to light medium shade depending on the shade range that has neutral undertones. And when I was looking, all the shades that were around my level seemed to have descriptions that said they had warm gold or peachy undertones. There was nothing that just said neutral that didn't look too light or too dark. I was looking at the 2s, and even 2N, for example, that you would think would just be neutral is described as being neutral with golden undertones. So it's really important to look at the descriptions when you're selecting your shade. The 2 shades surrounding my shade level that were truly neutral were 1.5N, which looked too light, and 3N, which was described as light medium with neutral undertones. And I knew because it was in the middle of the shade range, it was going to be too dark for me. So I ended up with 2WP, which is light with warm peach undertones. It's the correct level, but it is too peachy. I think the shade range overall leans very warm toned. There are only 3 cool rosy tones and 1 warm olive tone in the entire shade range. This is supposed to be a medium to full coverage, long wearing, velvety matte foundation that's hydrating because it has hyaluronic acid in it. It's supposed to blur pores and fine lines and wrinkles for up to 12 hours and give you a smooth, flawless finish and feel incredibly lightweight. And it's supposed to be great for all skin types, especially oily, and be water resistant. It's cruelty free, vegan, fragrance free. Now, alcohol is the 5th ingredient, which isn't unusual for a long wearing foundation. A lot of times they put alcohol in foundations to help them spread and dry down elegantly, and it evaporates. So this is where I get really confused with this foundation because the general rule for water-based versus silicone-based foundations is that most foundations will have water as their first ingredient, and if silicones are anywhere near the ingredient list, even if water is the first ingredient, it's a silicone-based foundation. They focus on this being a water-based foundation and prepping with water-based products. Water is the first ingredient, but silicones are the 2nd and 3rd ingredient. There are silicones a little bit further down too. So that just does not make sense to me if they had not said anything about prepping with water-based products and this being a water-based foundation. Just looking at that ingredient list, I would have said this is a silicone-based formula. This will be brought up again. This has a pretty thick texture that kind of adheres to your skin as you blend it out, so you do need to work fairly quickly, but I didn't find it difficult to work with. It didn't set so quickly that it was difficult to blend. Now, I had more dryness than usual around my nose and my mouth area just because of sinuses, and my nose was running a lot during the testing of this foundation, but I do deal with dryness sometimes anyway. I have combination oily skin that's pretty normal and can be dry around the perimeter, and I get some shine and oil breakthrough in my T-zone, so I sort of deal with everything. And I noticed when I was blending this out, even with a sponge, it did pick up on those dry areas, those flaky areas a little bit sometimes. I just had to press them back down to smooth it out so they wouldn't be noticeable. It wasn't a big deal, but my flakes were pretty moderate. If you have very dry skin, it might be an issue for you. A little bit goes a long way. The first day I applied it with a damp sponge on half of my face using somewhere between a half or 2/3 of a pump, and I got really nice coverage with it. I find if I apply too much, it can look a little bit heavy. This also applies nicely with a brush. Sometimes quick setting foundations sort of leave streaks with the brush or look like they're sitting on top of my skin, but I don't get streaking with this, which is really nice, although I do like to press it into my skin further with a sponge after I'm finished just to really fuse it in further. So I'm giving it a 3 for application. It's kind of middle of the road. Now it could be my skincare, but I don't get a soft velvet finish right off the bat before setting. It's almost a radiant finish and it does stay tacky to the touch with or without primer. But after it's set, it looks really pretty. I'm hoping you can see this first day because it was really overcast outside. And I do think you can get medium to nearly full coverage depending on how you apply it and how you layer it. So I'm giving it a 4 for coverage because for me anyway, it didn't go completely full coverage. I could still see my sunspots a little bit through this, which I don't mind. I'm not one that needs a full coverage foundation. Now here we are 5 hours later. This day 1 was just my regular skincare with no sunscreen because I was indoors all day. It was overcast and I didn't wear a primer on this day. And I would say it looks okay. I'm getting some shine, some creasing in my deeper forehead line, and some settling into my pores. It's definitely not as flawless as it was earlier. Now I'm combining the first 2 days where I tested this because the results were pretty much identical, even though on day 2, I did apply sunscreen as the last step of my skincare. And this clip is from a little over 6.5 hours into the day after application. You can see some shine and wear around my nose and cheeks and settling, especially into my forehead crease. Now I'm going to show you a very, very up close detailed clip. Hopefully you can see it a little bit better. I was really surprised at how shiny I was getting with this with just my skincare. So I started trying it with primers. I started out with water-based primers since that's what they said to do. This day is the Huda Beauty Easy Blur Primer, and at an hour and a half, you can see the shine that's coming through and some wear by my nose, which is due to my runny nose that I was very, very lightly wiping, but this is supposed to be water resistant, right? I feel like it looks like 5 hours have gone by, not 1.5. So at around 3 hours, I decided to just lightly blot my face with a tissue, and it blotted pretty well, I guess, but look at the coverage around my nose. I mean, it's just gone. And when I blew my nose into toilet paper, not to be gross, look away if this bothers you, I covered up the wet area, the gross area, but the foundation just rubbed right off, and I wiped my nose very, very lightly. This consistently happened every day, and here we are at 10 hours, just no. So at this point, I'm thinking maybe it'll work better with a silicone-based primer. I tried it with a couple. The day you're seeing was with Hourglass Veil, which is a pretty no-fail primer for me when it comes to silicone-based foundations, at least good ones that work for me. Now, when I looked up close in a magnified mirror, I felt like it looked a little bit dry, kind of powdery once my makeup was complete, but from a normal distance, it looked pretty. But nothing keeps the shine from coming through, apparently, with this foundation a few hours later, or wearing away or transferring if it gets lightly brushed or wiped or wet. I don't know if my skin isn't compatible with it or what the deal is. I got shiny with it every day, and when the shine came through, I just felt like it settled into pores, texture, lines, creases, everywhere I didn't want it to. So I'm giving it 2s for pores and texture and finish because neither one end up the way they're supposed to. I am giving it a 5 for feel though, because I usually start to feel heavy and greasy. I start to feel the foundation on my face when those things happen, and I never did, which is kind of weird. And because this is supposed to be a long-wearing, water-resistant foundation that on me performed terribly, I'm giving it a 1 for longevity. I mean, each day I wore it, I just felt like as the shine took over, it started to fade and look worse and worse, which is not what I expect from a long-wearing foundation. So if you have mature, dry, or dehydrated skin, I just don't think you're gonna like the way this applies and how it looks once it's applied. And if you have oily skin, the target skin type for this foundation, I'm not sure if you're gonna enjoy this foundation either based on my week with it. So this not only has my longest review, but it also has my lowest rating out of any foundation in this foundation roundup with a 2.8. By the way, I'll have everything that I'm sharing and wearing linked for you through the YouTube shopping icons that I can. They don't always have everything though, so if you don't see something, check my description box because everything will be listed and linked there, including where I have all of my primers and powders that I enjoy and recommend for different skin types. And for those of you that think you might be my foundation or concealer shade match twin, I have those lists that I always keep updated over on my blog, and those links are down in my description box too. So I'm moving on to Milani Conceal and Perfect Blur Out Skin Tint Stick. I'm not going in ranking order for this video because I didn't want to talk about all negative stuff at the beginning, so I'm kind of mixing it up. So this retails for $16.99 depending on where you buy it or if it's on sale, as with most drugstore products. You get 0.28 ounces. Remember, this is a stick product, not liquid. And there are 25 shades. I'm in shade 7, light medium. And this is the first stick foundation I've seen where they tell you to replace the plastic cap. So hold on to this, don't lose it. It may dry out if you lose it, if you don't replace it. This is vegan, cruelty-free, fragrance-free, and alcohol-free, and is supposed to be this ultra lightweight, silky, skincare infused, light to medium buildable coverage skin tint stick that gives you a no makeup, soft, matte, natural blurred second skin finish. So I was really excited to try this. It glides on to my skin beautifully and blends out quickly and easily. It kind of melts into my skin. Whether I'm applying it with a primer or not, it just feels creamy and hydrating as I'm applying it even. And I agree that it is buildable from light to medium coverage. It feels hydrating and lightweight at the same time and gives a natural skin-like dewy finish before setting that turns into a natural skin-like no makeup kind of blurred finish after, which unfortunately does not stay that way for me without a primer. I get shiny pretty quickly with it, which emphasizes pores and texture, and it gets shinier and shinier throughout the day. So for that reason, I personally am giving this a 2 for finish because it's supposed to give a natural soft matte finish without altering it in any way, and I don't get that. You could be different. It also doesn't wear very long for me without a primer during the day. I need to wear a primer with this, which is fine. I'm not someone that minds wearing a primer. I still get some shine with this when I wear a primer, but it's not a greasy shine, and it's not a shine that emphasizes pores and texture, and I don't have to blot nearly as often when I do get shine breakthrough. So a primer really helps this out. Now, if I want to extend the wear time and get a moderately long day out of it, I do need a setting spray after. And when I wear both primer and setting spray, I can go longer between blotting times and I get, a nice moderately long day out of it. Now, I don't see any major wear claims with this anyway, but I would give it average longevity for my skin type. And I'm happy that even when I do get shine, it still feels good. It doesn't feel gross on my face. So my overall rating for this is a 3.6 because it still works really well for me when I add those other things. And I actually think this could work well across all skin types depending on, what your skin prep is, what primers you wear with it, what you set it with. It's quick and easy to use, and it's at a great price point. Dior Forever Hydra Nude Foundation is one I am reviewing solely because you asked me to. I had so many requests to review this foundation. Here we are. But this is one that I didn't think it would work for my skin type. So I was going to skip it altogether. But every now and then I'm surprised. I mean, you just never know. And I'm holding it here because when I hold it here, it almost looks like it doesn't have a lid on it. It blends in with my background. So this is $57 for 1 ounce. There are 18 shades. I'm in shade 2N Neutral, which is light skin with neutral beige undertones. This is supposed to be a lightweight, alcohol-free, water-based skincare foundation hybrid that gives you 48 hours of hydration and 24 hours of wear with a no makeup feel and medium invisible coverage. It's comprised of 50% water and 96% natural origin ingredients and mineral pigments that are supposed to give you this flawless, extremely natural look. It does have fragrance about halfway down the list, and I'm giving myself a refresher here. I notice a very faint soft scent. I almost think that that added fragrance might be put in there to mask some of the scents of the natural ingredients that might otherwise smell bad. I could be wrong about that, but that's what I'm kind of getting because the fragrance is so soft. So it has a pretty thick texture, but blends out extremely easily. When I apply this with a brush, I think I get nice medium coverage with no streaking at all. I get a bit less coverage when I apply it with my fingers, which kind of surprised me. I think because it has that thicker texture, it sort of spreads over my skin versus into my skin and evens my skin out sort of like a skin tint. If you like to blend foundations out with your fingers, you could always start out that way and build up the coverage with a brush like I am here. I prefer a brush or even a dry sponge for just a bit more coverage personally. Before setting, it has a lovely hydrated, dewy looking finish that's smoothing on my pores and texture. It doesn't look greasy or wet. Sometimes dewy finishes can actually have the opposite effect on pores and texture and make them look more exaggerated, and this doesn't do that. But there's definitely some tackiness there before setting. After my makeup is applied and set down with powder, that tackiness is gone and my makeup looks natural, healthy, and skin-like. I get shine breakthrough with this foundation no matter what, every 2 to 3 hours. It doesn't matter if I'm wearing primer or not, but it doesn't go into unflattering, texture exaggerating territory for some reason, which is nice. But I do start to feel the foundation a little bit more. It doesn't feel greasy or gross. I just feel more hydrated when I start to feel that shine coming through. And I can go about 6 to 8 hours, depending on whether or not I'm wearing a primer, before my makeup starts to wear away. And when it does fade gradually and elegantly. So I'm giving the finish a 2 because I don't get the finish that I feel the claims say I should, but that doesn't mean you won't. It just has to do with my skin type. And I'm giving the longevity a 1 because I'm not getting anywhere close to 24 hours of wear out of this foundation. But I have a feeling if you have normal or dry and mature skin, you might have more success with the finish and the wear of this foundation than I do with my combination / oily skin. Even though my skin is on the mature side as well, it just has to do with skin type. And of course, I live in humidity too, which also plays a factor. I've been waiting months for Maybelline Superstay Lumi Matte Foundation to come to the US, and it's finally here. This retails for $12 for 1 ounce. There are 24 shades, and I'm in shade 125. It's fragrance-free, non-comedogenic, and it's supposed to be suitable for all skin types, and it's supposed to give you buildable, full coverage with a matte finish and a hint of luminosity and feel weightless and last all day long. This is a silicone-based foundation that has amino acids and this flexible film that resists sweat, water, and transfer, and is supposed to give all-day shine control, which is fantastic if you have oily or combination skin. Now, I do notice a slight, I'm going to say, alcohol scent to this. It does have alcohol in it, as do many foundations that are smoothing and set down quickly. It has a somewhat runny texture that blends out extremely easily and quickly with either a sponge or a brush to give really natural, beautiful, medium to, I would say, just above medium full coverage. It doesn't streak with the brush the way some long-wearing foundations can, although I do think the end result looks a little bit smoother with a sponge. This is extremely smoothing on pores and texture with a soft satin matte finish before setting, and after setting it just has a really pretty natural matte finish with a hint of luminosity, just like it's supposed to. It feels extremely lightweight and wears well throughout the day. Now, I can get some shine as the day goes on. I'm talking like 7 or 8 hours into the day, which is really good with the level of humidity we have here in New Orleans and my skin type. But a silicone-based primer underneath mitigates that for me, as you can see in this clip taken here at 10.5 hours. Because this applies, blends out, and wears so well for me on all areas of my face, the normal dry areas around the perimeter, as well as my shine-prone areas in the center of my face. And because of the smoothing, luminous matte finish, I want to say this could work for any skin type, any age. But there is the alcohol component in here. So if you have very, very dry skin, or if you're just wanting to avoid that, this may not be the foundation for you, but I love it. This is my highest rated foundation in this video at 4.8. It's a near perfect rating. The price point is great. I love this so much more than I thought I would. I mean, I had no idea what I was going to think, but it's a good one. Reformulations are new products too, and we have a reformulation from Bare Minerals. This is the Bare Minerals Bare Pro 24-hour Skin Perfecting Powder Foundation. Now, the previous version was 16 hours, and that was also a reformulation of the previous powder foundation. It's cruelty-free, vegan, and has no synthetic fragrance, similar to the previous version. It's also talc-free, like the previous version was, and claims to be a long-wearing, natural matte, full coverage foundation that gives all-day weightless wear and oil and shine control. It's also, just like the previous formula, supposed to improve your skin tone and texture over time and can be used wet or dry. Now, I looked up the previous ingredients, and they both have these ingredients highlighted on your screen. What are the differences, you might be asking? So instead of being humidity, transfer, and sweat resistant like the previous version, this new version claims to be transfer, humidity, and sweat proof, along with grease and waterproof, whereas the previous version had no claims about either of those last two. And of course, the new version claims 24-hour wear versus 16 with the other. So I guess it's more bulletproof than the previous version. That's what we're looking at. Assuming the information I found on the previous version is correct, it was also $42, which is what this is right now. Now, this is 0.28 ounces, and it looks like the previous version was 0.2, so you might be getting more product with this. There are still 35 shades available. Now, in the previous version, I had light 25W. I grabbed 25N in this one, which is described as light neutral with a subtle pink hue. Now, just like with the previous version, I think the shades lean very warm with all of these shades. I mean, this is not screaming neutral with a pink hue to me. This is pretty warm. So I typically apply my powder foundations with a brush for medium coverage and then press it in with the sponge where I want to build coverage. I would say this is easily buildable from light medium to medium full coverage this way. One thing I wanted to note about the previous version, there was a lot of powdery kick up with it when I dip my brush in. That doesn't happen with this version. It's a lot creamier, and I really like that about it. I also wanted to show you how it applied using just the sponge. So on the other side, I use the enclosed sponge to build it up to just above medium full. It's very customizable. You can dust on a very thin layer for medium coverage or build it up to pretty much full coverage. Not quite full, but almost full, and it applies very quickly and easily. It initially gives a very flattering, natural, soft matte finish that doesn't feel or look dry or powdery, and that's smoothing on my pores and texture. And it stays like that for close to 3 hours, and when the shine starts to come through, it settles into my pores a bit. It blots well. A lot of powder foundations can break down or wear away very easily if this happens, but this stays on. The shine without primer is too much. You can see me barely graze my skin here in this clip at around 9 hours, and my skin is mattified almost immediately from just that feather light touch. So a primer is a must. I can go a decently long day with a primer underneath, but it does feel good all day, even if I'm not wearing a primer, which is nice, and it's not something I can say of every powder foundation I've tried. This clip is from 11 hours, and I'd say my makeup overall started to fade at around the 9.5 or 10 hour mark on that day. So I'd say this is about on par with the last iteration of this powder foundation. It's not my favorite powder foundation. It's not my least favorite. It falls somewhere in the middle, just like the last one did, but it has better longevity than the last one did, which I do think is great. I think if you have maybe less humidity than I have here, or a normal skin type, maybe even normal to moderately dry, you may enjoy this one. I enjoy foundations at all price points. I go into these reviews completely unbiased, having no clue how they're going to turn out. And we definitely have a definitive winner and loser with this foundation roundup. Let me know your thoughts. Have you tried these? Do you plan on trying them? Do you agree with me? Do you not? Let me know your comments down below. If you want to see more foundation reviews from me, you can check them out here. And don't worry, I already have some reviews in the pipeline being worked on right now because there are still new launches that I need to talk to you about. I really hope you enjoyed this and that it helped you make a better buying decision in some way. If it did, give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you're not already. everybody. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.